and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 600. And today's date is February 24th, 2015. And the title of this episode is The Stage is Set. US government-controlled Islamic State expands into Middle Eastern countries to provoke war. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, I just want to make a correction. Yesterday, I was talking about how Ukraine and Russia and how Ukraine was banning the media from coming into Ukraine. They were banning all Russian media outlets. Yesterday, I might have said it the opposite way, where Moscow was banning the media outlets. Actually, it's Ukraine that was banning all the Russian media outlets, and Ukraine was going to create their own media outlet. And I just wanted to correct that before we get started. Now, we understand out in Greece, they've been dealing with the Eurogroup, the new government, the Syriza party. They've been trying to come up with some type of solution, and they have a 4-month extension. But it's starting to look like that they kind of folded here. It seems like they're not following through on their promises. Basically, it's starting to look like they failed the people. And as it turns out, the reason why not only the Troika received agreed-to version of the Greek reform proposal before midnight on Monday, but rushed these through with a favorable agreement today is that the European Commission drafted the entire letter. And they're the ones who created it. They're the ones who formed it. And we can see right now that this government is not really working in the best interest of the people. They promised many, many things: to get rid of the debt, to get rid of austerity, to fight against the Eurogroup. And it seems like they are not doing this whatsoever. And we're starting to look at the situation here, and we're starting to realize that we could see some type of revolution. We could see the people rising up and saying, you know what? You made many promises, and you have not followed through whatsoever. And we can see that the new prime minister, he promised the Greek population on primetime TV that they loathed the bailout program, and it wouldn't be extended, and that Greece would have a fresh start. The mandate it was elected on, one without austerity, and Greece folded virtually on every demand. The question is, did the NSA or other spy agencies have something on them? Because all of a sudden they were fighting, and then all of a sudden they just folded. They could have gone with Russia, they could have gone with China, but what happened here? And we can see that there could be some type of revolt in this. The people looking at this are scratching their heads, and they're saying, what is happening here? We are in the same situation. We're going to have to accept the bailout. There's going to be austerity. And this is no help to us whatsoever. We are back in the same situation that we were. They are not working for us. And we need a group of people in governments all around the world, depending on what country you're in, to stand up to these central bankers. It seems as soon as they pull out a little bit of dirt or have something on people, everything seems to collapse. I mean, we see it here in the United States all the time. When they want laws passed or they want a judge to rule in a certain way, the judge for weeks on end saying, nope, it's like Obamacare, it's unconstitutional, and all of a sudden it's constitutional and it's passed. And we see this is happening more and more. And we're going to have to watch Greece very, very closely, because we might see riots once again there, and we might see the Syriza party completely thrown out of power, because they are not working for the people. Now, here in the United States, we talk about unemployment over and over and over, and we know the government has been manipulating all the numbers. We know when someone who hasn't been on an interview within 4 weeks, they're considered fallen off, they're no longer looking, even though they're continually sending out their resume and looking for a job. People who've taken on 1, 2, 3 part-time jobs, each one of those jobs is counted as a full-time job. But if you're laid off from that part-time job and you're not working a certain number of hours and receive a certain number of dollars in payment, you're not counted as unemployment. So these numbers have been manipulated to present us with a picture that unemployment is fabulous here in the United States. Now, the Federal Reserve Chair, Janet Yellen, is looking at the U6 unemployment, and she is saying that these numbers with the part-time work definitely shows a less rosy picture. Well, I hate to say this, but it's a lot worse than what she's looking at. I mean, the U6 numbers are showing about 11% unemployment. If we look at the real unemployment, without all the manipulated calculations, we're looking at 25 to 30% unemployment. A lot of people say it's much, much higher than that. But let's be conservative right now and say it's only 25 to 30%. That means we are in a depression. Because when we look around the Eurozone, a lot of those countries, their unemployment rate is between 25 and 30%. They are in a depression. Their economies are falling apart. The same here. There is absolutely no difference. And when we look at economic indicators, and I'm not talking about the statistical numbers that the government creates, unemployment, GDP, inflation, the stock market, the suppression of gold and silver, the oil suppression. That's everything they can control. If we look at what's really going on, and of course they try to control real estate, but it gets difficult as time goes on, because when we look through the numbers and we see who's paying for cash and who's actually getting a mortgage and how many people are being unemployed in the mortgage or laid off in the mortgage departments, we can take all that information, put it together, and create a picture. And we're starting to see that picture, and we're starting to see that the real estate market is falling apart. Even Shiller is out there. And what does Shiller say? Well, the housing recovery is faltering despite the December home prices jumping. And we see that, the prices are not going up anymore. They're actually falling. I mean, when we take a look around the country, what do we see? We see prices leveling off. In many areas, they're starting to fall. Actually, a lot of people are having trouble bringing the traffic to the homes. A lot of these homes are on the market for 90, 100, 150 days. They can't move them. And when we look at first-time home buyers who are struggling to qualify for mortgages in a market and they can't get it, we see that those who are getting the loans are between $1 and $5 million. This is the fastest growing part of the jumbo market in January. So we see the free money is heading off to those people who are receiving it, and all the rest of the people who are trying to purchase houses, in 300,000 area, 200,000, or less than 150,000, they cannot get loans. No one is loaning to these people because they're risky. Bad credit, they don't have good paying jobs. A lot of people have part-time jobs, they're not making enough money. They're nervous about these people. Those people who are receiving free money from the Fed and who have been benefiting from this receive anything they want. And we are starting to see this, that the entire country is starting to turn into the 1% and then everybody else. And those everybody else people, they're having a very tough time surviving. It's not like they don't want jobs, because they do, and they're continually searching. There's just no jobs out there. And the ones they can find are low-paying jobs. I know many people who are in a certain field, which is technology, and it is very difficult to find that same job making that same amount of money. There are some jobs out there, not many, and they're making a lot less money. Now, of course, when you purchase a house, you purchase a car, and you have certain payments, you like to get that same salary. But when you can't really live in that same home. You can't make those same car payments. And it makes things very, very, very difficult to survive. And we're finding a lot of people are starting to feel this way. Because as there's more and more layoffs occurring, people can't find work. I mean, think about it. If Dell lays off, IBM lays off, and all these technology companies lay off, where is everyone finding a job? because even technical departments in banks and other financial institutions are laying off. It's very difficult because everyone's out there trying to find the same exact job. And I'm not just talking about the technical arena. I'm talking about every other type of job that's out there. In retail, if you're a salesperson or a manager and Staples is laying off, Best Buy's laying off, closing stores, Target's laying off, closing stores, a lot of stores going out of business like Radio Shack, what do? Where do you find that job? Everyone's fighting for that same exact job. Think about it. In Canada, 17,000 people are going to be looking for those same exact jobs. They're going to be very hard to find. We see that most Americans are completely flat broke, totally unprepared for coming economic crises. I mean, at this point, approximately 62% of all Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Adults under the age of 35 in the United States currently have a savings rate of negative 2%. A study that was conducted last year found that more than 1 out of every 3 adults in the United States has an unpaid debt that is in collections. One survey discovered that 52% of all Americans really cannot even financially afford the homes they are living in right now. 40% of Americans could not come up with $2,000 right now without borrowing it from someone else. Today, the average American household is carrying a grand total of $203,000 worth of debt. It is estimated that less than 10% of the entire U.S. population owns any gold or silver for investment purposes or as insurance purposes. And we can see that, the economy and the people are starting to realize something is wrong. And there is proof, because when we look at Gallup's U.S. Economic Confidence Index, it has fallen to an average of -2 last week, with the biggest drop since July. This is the first time the index has had a negative weekly average since late December. More people now saying the future will be poor than believe it will be good. 49% said it is getting worse. It is not getting better. And as time goes on and people start to realize what is going on here, why am I struggling? Why are my bills going up, but my income is going down? They're going to say, something is wrong. Why can't I find the same job with the same money? What is happening? And they're scratching their head, and a lot of people turn to the alternative media, the new media, and they start searching around. They say, this is starting to make sense. What these people are saying, what the corporate media and the government is saying, makes no sense. And then we see a movement. We see a movement of people who are waking up saying, yes, now I understand why this is all happening. And we know that gold and silver, they're being suppressed. And we see right now that there are going to be 10 banks, including JP Morgan, Goldman, Deutsche, Barclays, Soc Gen, UBS. They're going to be pro for gold rigging. Now, of course, they'll probably be hit with a fine. They'll pay this minuscule fine, and then they'll just go back to gold rigging. And this is what happens in this industry. The central bankers watch out for each other, and it gets posted in the news, and everyone thinks, oh my God, they had to pay $3 million when they made, trillions off of rigging something. So really, if I'm going to make $1 trillion, have to pay a $5 million fine, I made a really good profit on rigging. And why would I stop? They wouldn't. They would continually do this. But when we look around the country, around the world I should say, we see a lot of countries and a lot of central banks starting to ramp up gold. The Eurozone raised its gold holdings by 7.437 tons to 10,791 tons in January. The International Monetary Fund data released overnight showed. The rise in euro area gold shows how the ECB continues to view gold as an important monetary asset. Mario Draghi said in October 2013 that gold is a reserve of safety, that it gives you value protection against fluctuations against the dollar. And this is why every single person should own gold or silver. I don't sell it. I purchase it on my own. So I'm not going to tell people go out and go to this specific area because I do not sell it whatsoever. There are plenty of places out there that you can go out and find it. If you don't know of one, you can email me. It's not going to be an affiliate link or anything like that. I can tell you where I purchase it. I get nothing out of it whatsoever. But I'm not going to start mentioning all these different companies. You can find them right on the internet where all of them are. And there are some that have been around for a very long time. Now, Moody's is out there and they are downgrading Russian financial institutions. Moody's Investor Service said Tuesday it has taken rating actions on 7 Russian financial institutions following the weakening of Russia's credit profile. It's funny because the Chinese credit rating agency is continually giving these institutions AAA ratings while the Western rating agencies are continually downgrading. So there is a conflict of interest right now. And of course, as we know, these credit rating agencies are controlled by the central bankers. They do what they want them to do. Now, we understand the corporate media. They're always out there and they're always reporting on all different things. And people around the world and especially in the United States believe that they're telling the truth. But guess what? There are more lies that come out of the corporate media than truth. Actually, it's a lot of propaganda, and we have to remember, Amendment 114, the Smith-Mundt Act, which is a rider on the NDAA, Section 501, allows the U.S. government to use propaganda on the American people. And the corporate media, they take whatever the government gives them, and they run with it without even checking or anything like that. So it's all complete propaganda. And we can see from some of the stories that they produce, like Brian Williams, of course, it's been all over the place. The helicopter I was riding in got hit with an RPG. President Obama, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. The NSA, we aren't spying on the phone calls or emails of U.S. citizens. Government-run schools, Common Core provides your child with a quality, historically accurate education. How do they know this? They don't. It's propaganda. They're just introducing it. They have no idea. The FCC, we don't want to really control the internet. We just want to regulate it a little. No, they want to control the internet. The U.S. Congress, we can pay off the national debt by slightly reducing the acceleration of growth of new debt being adding to it. Well, no, they can't. They promised us that the debt would be paid off. And actually the debt has increased an immense amount. I mean, just look at it. When Obama took office, it was at 10 trillion. Now we're approaching 18 trillion. So right now, and this is everything that we know of, all the other factors that go into it, people say the actual debt is around 200 trillion. The White House says the number of unemployed Americans is falling, just like we promised. See, these numbers prove it. Well, we know they're lying. They manipulate the data. The mainstream media, the illegal immigrants carry no disease into U.S. cities, but unvaccinated American children are filthy and dangerous. Assad used chemical weapons on his own people, August 2013. Turns out it was the Free Syrian Army. Russia shot down MH17. Turns out the U.S. puppet government in Ukraine shot it down. Russia invades Ukraine with thousands of troops and tanks. It turns out that was a complete lie. No proof. The economy is fully recovering. Well, we know that one is a complete lie because we've been reporting on what has been going on here. And every time we report on real estate, the auto industry, unemployment, layoffs, we see the economy slipping every single time. And bubbles getting bigger. And this is how we know that things are starting to fall apart. As we continue on, we will see all of this accelerate. And we have been seeing it accelerate, where they're enacting more and more programs to bring people in to keep this bubble inflated. And we understand right now that they're using fear, terrorism, They're trying to convince everyone that right-wing extremists are out there. They're everywhere. And all these people are the ones who don't agree with the government, who don't want to abide by the law. And they're out there telling us, yes, right-wing terrorists, they're carrying out sporadic terror attacks on police. They have threatened attacks on government buildings and reject government authority. And this is coming from a new assessment, new intelligence assessment circulated by the Department of Homeland Security. But seriously, when we look at this, and we look at domestic terror threat, the right-wing sovereign citizen extremists, and everything that they're talking about, is it really true? I mean, you would think these groups would be out there protesting, walking the streets, letting everyone know that they're out there. But when we look, how many cases are there that the FBI really counts? They've been telling us since 2010 there's 24. Well, that turns out to be almost like 5 a year. And does that really tell us that this is on the rise? No. And again, we have to ask, what do they consider an attack? I mean, one of the examples they use is basically a father and son back in 2012 were accused of engaging in a shootout with police in Louisiana in a confrontation that began with an officer pulling them over for a traffic violation. 2 officers were killed and several others wounded in the confrontation. And they called them sovereign citizens. Well, again, I don't really call them sovereign citizens. This is a criminal act. We see this all over the country. And this is what they're using as their prime example. I mean, this is not a cell of terrorists seeking attacks on seeking to attack citizens. So what about the threats of government buildings? They don't even list any. So all this propaganda is to try to convince the people when the entire system starts to collapse, and all those people who are out there talking against the government, these are the people they want reported. Anyone that is unhappy with the central banking system or the government, these are the people they'll be going after. And they're trying to put it in the minds of everyone that these are the people you need to look for. That's what they're doing right now. They're getting ready, prepared, because they know once this system starts falling apart, there's going to be tons of people out there saying, you know what, we've had it with this government, we had it with the central banking system, it is time to replace them. The same thing that's going to happen in Greece. Because when the government does not work for the people and the people are pushed into a corner and can't take anymore and can't lose anymore because they lost pretty much everything and they're not making an income, they start to take things into their own hands because there's nothing to lose. And they realize the only way to make a change is to push their agenda to make a change and to say, you know what? It's time for you people to leave. It's time to get back to the Constitution. It's time to put the American people first. It's time to get rid of the central bank that has caused all of this. Now, out in Ukraine, we understand Poroshenko has his mobilization where they're drafting many, many people. This has not stopped whatsoever. Even though there's a ceasefire and they're trying to talk peace, well, this has not stopped whatsoever. But what's very interesting about this is about 8,000 people who didn't want to be included in the draft, they're missing. They pretty much either left the country or they're hiding. And we see that the local military, they are searching for them because they're draft evaders, because they haven't listened to the government of Kiev, where they have to put themselves on the front lines and actually end up dead most likely because the puppet government wants the southeastern section of Ukraine and eventually Crimea. So there's 8,000 men completely missing. Now, Kiev says they will start to remove their heavy weaponry after a 48 hours of real ceasefire. The Kiev government is ready to start withdrawing its heavy weaponry. If the militia observes the ceasefire for 2 days, it will be the only signal needed to start this withdrawal. But the problem is Kiev is continually shelling. And Donetsk then fires back, and they say, oh, not the ceasefire. They do a little bit of shell, you hear gunfire, and they say, oh, not the ceasefire. And they can keep this going for a long, long time. Now, the Donetsk Republic, they started a full-scale heavy weapon withdrawal. They're pulling their weapons back, and it looks like Tuesday morning started a full-scale heavy weaponry withdrawal. And they are bringing back about 96 pieces of D-30 artillery weapons, and they're withdrawing them from Debaltsevo, Gorlovka, and Donetsk. Lugansk Republic to start artillery withdrawal from Debaltsevo at noon, and they're pulling everything back according to the Minsk Agreement. And the Minsk Agreement says that the weaponry withdrawal is expected to last for around 2 weeks in line with the Minsk Agreement. And this is exactly what they're doing, but again, Kiev is not doing this whatsoever. They want a complete, real ceasefire. Well, all they have to do is stop shelling the civilian areas, and guess what? You have a real ceasefire. But as we know, they're continually moving their artillery closer and closer as the Donetsk and Lugansk people move back. The Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, Kiev, and the self-proclaimed Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republic are establishing a joint commission to monitor truce in the East Ukraine. So they're coming together as some type of peacekeeping force to say, okay, let's have peace in this region. Do I think it's going to work? Most likely not, because as we know, the central banking system is not going to allow for peace. Not at all. Now, as the Donetsk and Lugansk people are pulling back their weapons, what is Poroshenko doing? Well, he's, as we know, he's continually keeping the mobilization, drafting more and more men. And while the foreign ministers of France and Germany and Russia and Ukraine were in a meeting in Paris, he is at the United Arab Emirates purchasing arms supplies. He struck a deal, and they will be supplying weapons to Kiev. Doesn't sound like a ceasefire to me. It seems like they're getting ready for a major, major offensive, and that's exactly what is going on here. Now, Kiev wants new sanctions to be imposed on Russia. They're saying by its actions, Russia is demonstrating that it is not going to implement the Minsk agreements. Well, actually, it's the opposite way. We know that Kiev, the central bankers, are not going to implement the Minsk agreements. Russia created the peace deal. They're the ones who've been talking to Germany and France, trying to coordinate this. I think the people of Donetsk and Lugansk should have been included in this, and they really weren't, so they really don't have to abide by this because they weren't really included in the agreement. But what we see is the United States is out there with England saying that, yeah, the United States will be considering further sanctions against Russia in the coming days, depending on whether there will be progress in the Minsk agreement. It's amazing. Russia comes up with a peace deal. United States, England, nothing to do with it. They didn't even present a peace deal. Actually, there should have been a peace deal coming from President Obama because he's a Nobel Peace Prize winner for peace. Why didn't he present a peace deal? Not at all whatsoever. Why wasn't he in there trying diplomacy to work out the situation? All they kept talking about is Russia better stop, Russia better stop, Russia better get their tanks and their troops out of Ukraine. And all of that was a complete lie. Now, as we know, the Minsk agreement says there should be no foreign troops in Ukraine. They all have to leave. Well, we see that David Cameron in England stated that the British military personnel are to be deployed to Ukraine for the first time in the next few weeks to provide advice and training to government troops. So he's going to bring in about 75 personnel into the area. Well, should they be allowed in? Because this goes completely against the Minsk agreement, doesn't it? We see that the U.S. is continually training Ukrainians. They have advisors there. Their general is in Ukraine. They are training. U.S. military officials say the Pentagon will be deploying a small number of troops to Ukraine to provide medical training to forces in Ukraine. This is unbelievable. So more and more troops are headed to this area. They're getting ready to provide lethal weapons out in the open. We already know they've been doing it for quite a long time, covertly, pretending that they aren't providing weapons, but we know they have been. But we see they're pushing their agenda. Now, it came out that Netenyahu has been lying about Iran having a bomb. I mean, Netanyahu presented the UN General Assembly in New York with a diagram of a cartoon bomb, complete with a burning fuse, and he used a red felt pen saying, they're right here, they're 90% of the way, and by next spring, at most by next summer, they will have a bomb. Do you know how many times the United States, Israel, has been telling the world that Iran is going to have a nuclear weapon and they're going to use it? It's been 30 years. Every year for 30 years, they brought this up. And it hasn't come true. And what we see right now is, as we know, the government officials lie to the people of the world. Netanyahu lied to the entire world. We know this because earlier today, in another historic Snowden-type whistleblower leak, one of the biggest such spy leaks in recent times, in which hundreds of dossiers, files, and cables from the world's major intelligence services, including Mossad, were unveiled by The Guardian and Al Jazeera. Netanyahu was contradicted by his own secret service. According to a top-secret Mossad document, Israel's intelligence agency concluded that Iran was not performing the activity necessary to produce weapons. It also means the Israel leader, who no doubt had all the information Mossad did, lied to the members of the UN and the entire world, with the clear intent of ultimately launching war which would lead to the death of thousands of innocent people. And every single government official out there lies to the people. Israel's government lies to the people. The US government lies to the people. England, they lie to the people. Everyone who is in government, who's taking the orders from the central bankers, will lie to push their agenda. They don't care who dies. They have no allegiance whatsoever. All they want is total control. And they keep lying. And actually, when you think they're telling the truth, it's actually a lie to cover their lie. This is how it works. Now, Russia is going to be offering Iran its latest missile system. Now, they tried to give them the S-300 missile system back in 2010, but because of the United States and Israel putting a lot of pressure on this, the deal was completely dropped. Iran right now is thinking about it. They haven't made any decisions. But this is a powerful missile system. It can engage missiles traveling at 4,500 meters per second with a range of about 1,500 miles. And Russia has also tried to sell this missile system to Syria and other Middle Eastern countries. Again, we have to remember, why would Russia want to do this at this point in time? Because they realize the central bankers are not going to stop. He knows what's going on. He understands war is coming. He can see from all the sanctions. He can see from the central bankers continually provoking him, provoking and pushing war in the Middle East and in Africa, and he sees the pivot to Asia, in the Pacific, encircling China. He knows exactly what's going on. And every time they try to push war, and I'm talking about the central bankers, he comes out there and talks peace. Go back to August of 2013, when the United States was ready to go into Syria. He brokered a peace deal. Same thing in Ukraine, coup d'etat in Ukraine. The people didn't want to be involved with the puppet regime, so they wanted to vote themselves away. Of course, the central bankers weren't going to let this happen, and they started war. He brokered the peace deal. Every time they try to push war, he stops it. Now, he could just say, you know what? I want war. Let's get this on. He would have done this back in 2013, but he didn't. And of course, the United States is out there, and they're opposing this anti-ballistic missile system. And they're saying that this shouldn't happen, just like the S-300 missile system. That didn't happen. And again, they don't want Russia to get a footing into this area with their advanced missile systems. They're protecting their economic deals throughout the Middle East, Africa, and Eastern Europe. And they know as more and more military assets are being placed near Russia, he knows what's going on. He realizes that war is coming. Now, out in the Middle East, we see the Yemeni president, I should say, he withdrew his resignation. He presented his resignation when the people took over, and he kind of escaped and got out. And he's saying he's withdrawing. He retracted his resignation and saying that he is still the president of Yemen, but he is not in control. Just like the parliament, the government in Libya is saying they're still in control, which they are not. Now, in Yemen, we see a French woman working for the World Bank was kidnapped on Tuesday in the Yemeni capital. And of course, does this mean that we need to invade Yemen at this point? Because as we know, all the embassies were evacuated, they're closed down, and they're getting ready to make a move into all these Middle Eastern countries because they're losing them left and right. We see that the Islamic State is going to declare an emirate in Lebanon, and we have to remember, with this new authorization for war, wherever the Islamic State is, this is where the government can go. And we said this many, many months ago, that we will see the Islamic State being pushed into each one of these countries. It doesn't matter. It could be 5 men in there, 10 men in there, as long as they're waving the flag. Ah, look, the Islamic State is in there. Oh, look, they're in Libya. Oh, look, they're in Lebanon. Oh, they're in Iraq. And they're in Syria. We can get to go all these places because this is where the U.S. government central bankers, they need to get back into, replace the governments with their puppet government, and they would love to get into Syria, then Iran. So we can see they're pushing their agenda. I mean, right now in Libya, what they're doing is they're saying that the Islamic State has seized a large amounts of chemical weapons, including mustard gas and the nerve agent sarin. And we can see they're pushing their agenda. They're trying to make it look like that there's a sense of urgency of they need to get into these countries. And what's happening is the people are taking back their country. And it's getting worse as time goes on. And pretty soon that government who's hanging on by a thread, which is really not governing Libya, is going to be completely out. They won't even exist, and they know this, and they're running out of time. The same thing is happening in Yemen, and this is why they're planning this. New Zealand, they're getting ready to enter the war with the Islamic State. They're making the case that they should join in. And again, we have to remember, these are the people of each one of these countries. They are the ones who are rising up. Islamic State have been put in there for chaos. They don't even have an army. This is all propaganda. They're just a small little group where they maneuver them into all different areas. It's the actual people who are rising up. Those are the numbers they're talking about. This is why the United States needs to go back into Iraq, because they're losing the battle there. Basically, they have to retake Iraq. That's what they're doing. They have to retake Lebanon, retake Libya, retake Yemen. This is what they're doing. We're doing the same thing over and over and over again. But this time they're not going to stop because they understand the collapse is coming. Now, we talked about the DHS warning yesterday, how their budget is coming up and they're going to be voting on their budget. And of course, as soon as any of these agencies have their budget threatened, we see warnings of what's going to happen. You know, it's going to hurt the economy, terrorists are coming, we're getting information in. And one of them was in the Mall of America. And it could happen in any mall. But what's very interesting is that, you know, the Mall of America they have a no-gun policy in there. And it makes no sense because they're using the story that these terrorists are coming and they have weapons. Wouldn't it be better to fit every American with a bulletproof vest and give each American a weapon? Can you imagine if you're in the mall and the terrorists are there and everyone's wearing a bulletproof vest and the Islamic State starts shooting or firing and you see 300 people pointing a weapon at the terrorists? Of course, this makes sense to us, but the government, again, it doesn't, because it's a false flag and they know they're going to be the ones who are creating it. And secondly, it goes against their narrative of taking the weapons away from the people. But people are looking at this saying, well, this is the complete opposite of what we should be doing. Shouldn't you be arming everyone in the United States? If terrorism is a problem, because as we know, the police can't be everywhere. It's impossible. So let people go for training. Let them get their weapons. Let them get their bulletproof vests and protect themselves, protect their families. It makes sense. But as you and I know, this is all fake, phony, and false because the terrorists don't exist. The terrorists are the government. They're the ones who are doing this. They're the ones who are creating this. And they don't want the everyday American to have weapons to show that, oh wait, this does help. They don't want this whatsoever. They want to take the weapons away because as they know, as you know, eventually what's going to happen is they need to control us. Because when the collapse comes, they need to pick up those certain people. They don't want resistance. And this is why all of their stories now are starting to get mixed up. And people are starting to think and say, this doesn't even make sense anymore. I mean, State Representative Tony Cornish complains the bans not are only dangerous, but completely worthless. It makes no sense to take the weapons away from the people at this point in time. And I completely agree with him. Every single person should have a weapon. They shouldn't outlaw bulletproof vests. Everyone should have it. They should have body armor. But if you notice, they're doing the opposite. And the reason why is because they know what's coming. They know the entire system is collapsing. And they know they need to keep control. And you can see how things are progressing right now. Everything's starting to accelerate. We're seeing more and more of the Islamic State because, of course, the authorization of war is going to be voted on. So they have to keep the propaganda up. They're terrible. They're terrorists. They're coming to get us. Oh my God, the budgets are in jeopardy. The economy's in jeopardy. We see terrorist alerts here. The people who are against the government, it's rising. I mean, they're just continually using more and more propaganda because we are getting closer to the collapse. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.